Alright, hi guys. So today is the third episode of the Millennial Talk Show. So today I have Jeremy with me. He's the founder of Secret Saturn. So we've been friends for the longest time, a couple of months. I think, in fact, at the start of this year, the both of us, we have a common belief. We believe that people can live to the maximum potential, live out their true purpose in life. That's why we kind of became closer. So today I've invited him to share with us a little bit more on this topic called trauma. Right. So Jeremy, welcome to our show.
Right. Thank you so much, Daryl, for inviting me here. Huge pleasure to be here. So likewise, I'm so glad we crossed paths. Our paths are just so aligned, and the work that we're doing for people, and just so grateful to be able to contribute to your community as well.
Right. So probably you can start introducing yourself to the audience. Like tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, sure. So, so I'm a practicing astrologer. So the branch of astrology that I practice is called psychological astrology. So I've been practicing this for the past 3 years, quite on and off. Only recently, I went really full-time into this. So I was a graduate of Self-Astrology Academy. So some of you might know it's Singapore's one and only Singapore's one and only astrology academy. So I was the first apprentice that graduated from the program as well. So yeah, I've been doing quite a number of events. It's only very recently that I decided to go really full steam into Sacred Saturn and to provide one-on-one coaching services to actually help my clients to heal from trauma and reclaim their purpose.
Awesome. Thank you for the beautiful intro. So I heard this word astrology. I also hear the word trauma. Like what got you first, started like working on trauma?
Oh, good question. Okay, so maybe I share a little bit of a personal story, and I think everybody has their own personal story as well. And for me, right, my journey towards trauma was because I unearthed, I through astrology I started to discover, who am I, like why am I here for, my purpose in life, and I started to look deeply into, why am I the way I am, and through that astrology actually gave me some insights regarding, the patterns in my life that kept reoccurring. So upon deeper inquiry, I started to realize that, hey, I actually, like, my own personal trauma actually stemmed from my father. I think this is something that we both share in common as well, Daryl. Right?
Yes.
We talk about this. So for me, I growing up, for me, I always had a very passive and absent father, right? And he was always around in the household. It's just that he just didn't make his presence felt. And growing up for me as a kid, I just felt it was very unsafe for me to express myself in very healthy measures because there's no one to assure me, to guide me, to validate me. And growing up as a kid, as I started to grow older, it had a lot. I always felt a strong need to seek recognition and validation for my efforts. But however, the funny thing is, whenever I'm at the point of probable success, right, I will tend to, in a way, self-sabotage myself by running away or to feign sick, because I was so afraid, right, that I was going to be judged or I was going to be seen as a failure. And what I noticed was, it was also because it was the same judgment that I had towards my father when I was a kid. So I was having this internal, judgment that was being projected outwards, and I think, oh shit, people is going to judge me the same way as well. And it kind of got me in a very counterproductive way throughout my entire career as well. So when I decided, hey, it's time for me to look deeply into this trauma pattern, this wound itself. And when I really dove in deep, and I really, I came a long way, and I kind of made peace with, my father in that sense. And, through the healing process, I started to realize that, hey, no matter how screwed up, our parents are, or how our emotional needs were unmet, we cannot choose, our parents, but we can actually choose what kind of parent we want to be for ourselves, for the people that we love as well. And, when I made that conscious decision, I realized that, okay, this is what I want to do. And through that as well, I wanted to help people to, heal from their past traumas as well, so that they can step into their own purpose.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I think it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability for you to share this openly with us. And just now when I'm gonna go off script here.
Go ahead.
Now when I heard this, I was so close to achieving success and I self-sabotage. And you mentioned that it's because you're afraid of failure.
Yes.
But why though? Can you share with us a little bit?
Okay. So for me, I think the judgment here is because growing up, I always saw my own father as a failure. And it was a very critical mindset, not mindset, but a judgment that I always had towards my father. And oftentimes, right, whatever mindset we have towards other people is what we think other people, what we feel other people will think of us. It's projected outwards.
Oh, I love that. Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
Right. So you always have fear of judgment because you judge others.
Yes, correct. So growing up, it was like that for me.
Okay. So you're afraid that if you achieve that certain level of success, people will still condemn you.
No, if I were to, yes, that's one way. The other way it could go is that if I were to try, I might fail. And if I fail, I might end up like my father.
Understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
That is
That's the
very clear
pattern.
for the audience now. Okay. Then yes, I like the word that you mentioned. It's a pattern.
Mm.
Right? Then that's why people get stuck in the fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, and they don't want to try it, they cannot break out.
Yep.
Which leads me to my next question here. Is trauma a conscious thing or a very subconscious thing?
Wow, good question. Okay, so I'll start off with this, but don't quote me on this. But based on my
Sure, sure.
observations,
Just share your observations.
yeah, this is just my personal observations and interactions with my clients. I'm starting to notice a certain pattern that trauma actually manifests itself first, right, on a subconscious level. So what I mean by this, right, this like for example, that pattern I just reiterated just now, like I have a certain fear of being judged, therefore I self-sabotage myself, I run away from possible achievements, right, and I give up halfway, and it becomes a whole pattern. But I didn't know it was a pattern. I just knew that why do I just keep running away? Why do I just like suddenly sick
Yeah.
running away? But I don't know what was the cause of it, right? So I think that's where it starts off as a very subconscious thing. Okay, it's a pattern response that will just keep repeating itself over and over and over again whenever we are triggered. So I'll give you another clear-cut example. Oftentimes some of my clients, right, when they get into relationships, like an abusive relationship, right, there's a pattern. Right? Usually they'll get into numerous abusive relationships, but even though the partner change, right, it's still the dynamic is still the same. It's still a pattern. Okay, so I think some of the audiences, maybe you could relate to this. You'll be stuck in the same relationship dynamic over and over again, even though the person changed, right? And I think like when what the work here, right, is that we need to start to bring whatever that's unconscious, right, into the conscious, so that we start to identify it, and that's when we are able to change the pattern itself.
I love that point as well. You bring the subconscious into the conscious.
Yep.
So, which brings me to another off-script question. If people are unconscious about it, how would they know that, hey, I should seek professional help, or probably it's something that I want to solve?
Very good question. I think a lot of people they'll only start to seek help when they are desperate. And when I mean desperate, they will start to realize that, oh shit, like I cannot go this way any further. Okay. And for me, right, I just feel that, a lot of things in our life, they just keep occurring, right? And it's maybe the universe's way of trying to push us towards, realignment towards our authentic self, our true self, right? But sometimes we just, we don't listen. We don't know how to listen. When we are so detached and so dissociated from our own body, our own emotions, right? Oftentimes we don't pay attention to what life is trying to teach us. And that's where we start to fall back into the patterns again. So going back to your question, which is, sorry, what was the question again?
So I was asking, let me think about it. What was the off-script question that I asked? How would they know, right? How would they know that they have help for this? Yeah.
Okay, got it. So like sorry, going back to my answer. Yep. So it usually comes to a point of desperation, right? When you realize, hey, I want to stop, like how making this decision to go on this path, right? There's a lot of like how much losses do I had so far, right? And this is when I decide for myself, okay, I want to make a change. And that's when, you say, how can I make that change? And you start to ask the right questions that lead you back on the path.
Okay, I love that. I think I just want to summarize that as well. So which meant that in your journey to attaining something,
yep,
you have probably experienced countless setback, going through the same thing, and there's a same negative result.
Yep.
That's where people will say, hey, you know what? Probably it's time to change something.
Yep.
Right. So I think the reason why I'm asking this question is because vast majority of the time, people just probably complain. Probably they'll feel, why is this happening to me again? But they never ask, what can I actually do about it? So that's why I think it's important for us to address this for some of our millennial audience, right? That is currently hurting through certain patterns that they might have.
And just to add on that, and I think what I'm starting to realize also is that, sometimes people know what to do or what to do to change, but they still don't change it. Yep. And I think the reason why is because simply we don't feel safe enough, right, to break out the pattern because it's so familiar to us. It's our conditioned norm. And okay, so for example, going back to the example I gave just now that, like sometimes we are so attracted to relationships that are just very chaotic in nature. Most of the times, right, our relationship patterns often model after our parents' relationship patterns as well, because it's the first, our first experience of love, of relationship. So we start to model after their attachment patterns as well. And when you grow up in an environment, right, that is modeled after chaos, right, the only way for you to experience love is chaos. Right? You don't know any other way. You don't know any other stable way of experiencing love. So when you suddenly are presented with the opportunity to say, hey, maybe like love could be experienced in a healthier measure, which is stable, right? But it's scary because you never knew what it was like growing up for you in that way.
Yeah, well said. So which brings us to the next question, right? Why is it unhealthy, right, to have this trauma?
Okay, great. I think for me, first of all, let me define trauma so that we are looking at it the same way. So the way I
Yes.
look at trauma is that, imagine our emotional. So I look at it as three bodies: the emotional, the physical, and the mental. So all these are three capabilities, right, that are meant to function optimally at 100%. Okay, but because of a certain experience, right, or event, right, that causes an element of distress, right, that is very overwhelming. So it led to our nervous system to actually dysregulate itself, and it means that we no longer function at 100%. We might be function at 20%, 30%, 60%. So that gap, right, is due to trauma. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. And this is why it's I wouldn't say it's unhealthy. It's not optimal because we are also capable of so much more. But because of a certain event, right, we let it define us. We let it control our patterns of being, and therefore we are no longer expressing ourselves at our highest potential.
Love it.
Mm.
Understood. Right. So and at the start of this call, you actually mentioned, right? At the start of this podcast, you mentioned this word astrology.
Mm.
So can you briefly share with us that how can astrology, right, heal trauma?
Okay, so just a quick clarification. Astrology doesn't entirely heal trauma.
Okay.
Okay, what it does is that it helps you to identify or give insights into how your nervous system is wired, or at least that's the way I practice astrology. Okay, how your nervous system is wired. So what do I mean by this? So for example, I'm not sure if any of you guys have actually seen your natal chart. Most people only know their sun sign, but astrology is way more than that, right? So astrology is actually the study of the placements of the planets at the exact time that you were born. Okay, so for example, right, I can ask you a simple question right now, Daryl. What is the date of birth right now? Just a quick question.
0904. So 9 of April.
So that is Aries, Sun in Aries, right?
Ah.
So my first question to you is, okay, Sun equals to identity, the way you express yourself, the way people present. So Aries is the warrior sign. Aries is an entrepreneur. Aries likes things fast. So my first question to you is, what was it in your early childhood, right, that made you want to prove yourself so much and want you to, keep on pursuing success, want you to keep progressing so much?
I want my mom and dad to be proud of me. In terms of my grades, probably.
Yep. Was there somewhat an early experience where you felt as though you were invalidated before? That's why you felt you had to move fast. You prove yourself as fast as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. When my dad said that I'm not good enough and all the things.
Yep. So basically what I demonstrated here is how a certain planetary configuration, right, gives you clues as to why you are the way you are, and how it can help you to identify who you're actually meant to be, your strengths, your weaknesses, and like you are just unique the way you are, right, because of your early childhood experiences as well. And what I want to do, or through my actual reading itself or my consultation, right, what I try to do is to help them to own parts of themselves in their past that they have actually denied and repressed because of a certain traumatic incident. Yeah.
Okay, understood. So for the audience that's listening to this or watching this right now, right, that has gone through something traumatic, right, what can they actually do about it?
Whoa. Okay, so I think the trauma work is actually like a very, very deep, and it's not an overnight thing. Okay, it's a long-term process. But the first thing I really want to, I really hope for like anybody who's listening to this is to realize, right, that any behavior that you're enacting over and over again. So we talk about the pattern behaviors, right?
Yep.
For example, whether it's procrastination, whether is it like addiction, right? Whether is it like you tend to repress your emotions or you repress your own self, right? So all these so-called self-sabotaging behaviors, right, is actually your nervous system's way of keeping yourself safe. Okay. So what do I mean by this? So for example, for me, I tend to procrastinate. So going back to my childhood wounding, right, of my fear of failure. So the reason why I procrastinate is my behavior, right? The reason why I procrastinate is because I am afraid of risking failure. So I'm keeping myself safe to avoid failure.
Yeah.
So it's very, very weird because a lot of people say like, okay, like this is your self-sabotaging behavior. And to me, it's very weird because nobody in the right mind will wake up one day and say, today I'm going to self-sabotage myself by procrastinating. It doesn't work that way. It's a very autonomic response.
Yes.
And we are responding in this way because you just want to keep ourselves safe. And the reason why I'm saying this is because any one of you who's hearing this, right, who's listening to this, I just want you to know that you can release any self-judgment or self-guilt, right, that for enacting the way you are. It's just your nervous system way of keeping yourself safe, right? So you can stop blaming yourself for the way you are right now. I think that's the first step, right? Learning that it's just your way of keeping yourself safe, and you're just normal, you're just functioning normally, you're just surviving. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the next step then is to get very, very clear about the root cause trauma as to why that whole pattern is playing out. So I think that's when you start to ask deeper questions. Why am I procrastinating? What was it before in my past, right, that I am so afraid of that led me to use procrastination as a way to run away from the emotion. Okay. So that's when we start to ask deeper questions to identify it. Okay, of course, it's going to be difficult for most of you, especially when this is not like you don't really practice self-inquiry that deeply, and oftentimes that's where you probably need to seek like whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, someone who's of a third party who's able to look inside within you, and look at things that you yourself are not able to see within yourself. Okay,
Right.
so I think that's the fastest way to like overcome, to identify certain trauma patterns and to get over it.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you for sharing. So just to sidetrack a little bit here.
Mm.
When you mentioned just now, like you have fear of failure, you procrastinate. Does that mean that most people actually face trauma, or like is that what's that about? Yeah.
Okay, that is a very good question. I do believe that everyone has an element of trauma, emotional
Okay.
trauma. It's the question is to what degree does it affect them?
Mm.
Okay, to what degrees? Like for example, I'm sure Daryl, you probably experience fear, and you know the fear of judgment, the fear of failure. But knowing you, right, you're somebody who's like, whenever I feel this, I choose to respond the other way.
Yeah.
The question is, does it affect you as much as compared to somebody who's been so caught up in like their fears that they cannot move at all? So I think that becomes an issue.
Okay, I love that. I love that. So I just want to summarize for the listeners. I'm always thinking about the listeners, right?
Mm.
So for the listeners out there right now, listening to this, ask yourself, to what extent this fear of failure is holding you back? Like, do you still take action sometimes? Or is it completely crippled you, or like in some sense you're paralyzed by it, that you beat yourself up, and that's where the negative spiral effect start kicking in? Would you say that's a decent summary of what you just said?
Yes, yep, correct. And I think the real trauma work is actually, right, being able to choose to move forward despite your fears, despite your emotions. And I think that's the real work that needs to be done. Yep.
Okay, understood. So I also want to ask you a little bit, because I watched your journey, how you started this.
Mm.
So is there any exciting project that you're currently working on?
Yes, thanks for asking this. So
Yeah.
I actually had a webinar just yesterday. It's called Decoding Your Trauma Patterns. So it's I actually came out with this framework of my own where I help my audiences. I conducted a workshop where I led my audiences through a step-by-step basis, right, to identify their root cause trauma. Okay, and over the webinar, I also shared why is it so important to look at root cause trauma instead of like whether it's your negative emotions, your negative behaviors, right? Like why is it so important to deal with trauma on its root cause level instead of the external manifestations of it? So besides that, I'm also I'm about to launch my own coaching program. So I think the details will be out this week, very very soon as well. So just keep a lookout for that as well. Yep.
Awesome. So just now, I'm super busybody. I want to dig in deeper. So why is it important, right? Why is it important for them to really find their root cause versus the superficial stuff that is happening they mentioned earlier?
Oh, okay. Thanks for asking this question. So
Yeah.
if we look at the cycle, right? Okay, it's very hard for me to explain this, but let me try my best.
Yeah, try your best.
So we think of a thought, right? For example, a thought could be I feel like, okay, so I'm looking at somebody with the example of somebody who loves to people please. So who's a
Okay.
conditioned people pleaser.
Yeah.
So the belief, right, the narrative she has is that I need to please people, I need to make people happy, right? And this thought, right, just comes because of a feeling, right, of an emotion that if I don't please people, I am unloved, I'll be unworthy, right? And this feeling, right, feeds into the behavior, okay, of therefore I need to people please, otherwise I won't be unloved. And because the action, right, when she starts to people please, I reinforce against the idea that I need to people please people. I need to please people.
Understand.
Yep. So you see the whole cycle just coming into play, right?
Right.
And when you're just looking at just the behavior, the thought or the emotion, right, you're just changing, you're just changing one third of the entire cycle.
Mm.
But if you really want to create a new pattern, right, a new thought, emotion, and behavior, you need to change the root cause, because the root cause is what caused the thought and the emotion and the behavior to occur in the first place. So
Yeah.
think of it as your internal programming, okay?
Understand.
Your outward manifestation, right, is a projection of your internal programming. Unless you manage to change your internal, right, there's no way your external could change a bit, but it will still never change the internal.
So, so now I'm gonna challenge you a little bit more. I'm
Okay.
very curious. So when you mentioned just now about the people pleaser example, right? So assuming that an external solution could be, so stop people pleasing lah. So assuming after she gone through your coaching, right? What can she expect?
Great, I love that. Okay, so what I'll do, right, when somebody who's a people pleaser, right? Actually, this is a very recent client of mine. So
Yeah.
So I'll use the example. So she was a people pleaser. So in a root history, right, her own trauma, her own past, right. For her, she always grew up feeling. So her mom was somebody who was very, very religious. Who was always enforcing Christian ideals upon her. Not that it's bad. It just like it made her feel as though she had to abide to her mom's belief, and she had to, she had to shut herself off to not to express herself. Otherwise, her mom will be unhappy with her. So in other words, growing up for her, in order for her to get loved by her mom, she had to keep quiet. She had to repress herself. She had to go according to what her mom actually expects of her.
Understood.
Right? So that developed a way that for her growing up, that means in order to get love from people, right, I have to meet their demands. Yeah, correct. I have to meet their demands. So through that, through the process with me, right, what I helped to identify was first of all that root cause, so which is the mother thing I just talked about. Okay. Then what I helped her to do was to go back to her past. So this is where a little bit of a meditation, a visualization exercise is involved, where I help her to go back to her past, to tap into a emotion of love and compassion, and then go back to the time of the past, a traumatic incident, right? And to say whatever she always wanted to say, whether it's a parent, to her mom, to her siblings back then. So that she completes the process of, as a younger child, she was not able to say all those things.
Beautiful.
Right? And therefore, there will be release, okay? There will be release. And once that's done, right, once we resolve the past, that's when we say, I will help her to identify, okay, look, like if you are somebody who people pleases, right? First of all, we can identify relationships mean very, very, it's a huge thing for you. So if you are driven by relationships, how can I then use this, your affinity to wanting to connect with people, right, in a more purposeful manner?
Understood.
Yeah. So then we start to find ways to allow her to, build even more fulfilling relationships in that way.
Beautiful stuff. I actually never really asked you, even though we are friends, for the actual technicality. So it's good that we get it for the audience here to listen exactly what you do, right, to serve them. Right. So I have the last question for you. So where can the audience find you at?
Okay, sure. So the audience can find me on Instagram. I'm actually most active on Instagram. So I have two ways you can reach out to me. My personal Instagram is at Ethereal Spaces. That's ETHEREAL_SPASCES. Okay, so that's my personal. I'm pretty open. You can just reach out to me, DM me, and so on. If you want to take a look at my astrology account, that is at Sacred Saturn. So that's SACRED _SATURN. Sacred Saturn.
Right. No worries. I will most likely put a link in the podcast and the videos as well.
Thank you so much, Daryl.
Once again, thank you so much for spending your time with me and sharing all these insights with the audience.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving the opportunity to share as well.
All right. Catch you soon.
All right. Thanks, bro.